It's a long 1 minute. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome. This is the ifmaKC's first soft skills session, and this will be a continuing offering that we'll be doing once a quarter, with the intent that, as I just heard on another podcast with Mike Petruski, we need to be working more and more intensely on our soft skills and learning how to communicate, learning how to motivate, learning how to have more active participation in meetings is definitely one of those things that's needed. So this will be our very first one. I want to welcome everybody. Please stay muted until the end, and then you're welcome to unmute to ask questions of Stephen. Stephen Iwersen is a very well-known keynote speaker. We're very excited that he's here with us today. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen, and he's going to help us understand a little bit more about no more boring virtual meetings. So Stephen, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Tina. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of the very first of your series. I'm glad to be a part of what you have going on, and there is a lot going on when it comes to virtual presentations and meetings. We're going to cover quite a bit as quickly as I possibly can. And before we do, what I'd like to do is just get a little better acquainted with you. And so I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I'm going to ask you to take your cursor and scroll over to the participants list. Now, if you haven't done that yet, go up to the top right corner and find the view button and click exit full screen, in case you're already in full screen. And then down at the bottom, you're going to find a place where it says participants. Click on that. It'll bring up the list. Now what I'll have you do, this is your assignment, is to take your cursor, go over, find your name. And where you find your name, a little button's going to pop up. It's got 3 little dots. And you're going to hit the more, it says more. Click on more. And it's going to come down with a little menu. And in that menu, it says rename. I'm going to ask you to click rename. Now, I don't want you to rename yourself. What I'm going to have you do is to add one thing to your name. Okay. Giving you a moment to find your way. So it's the more by your name, the menu drop down, rename, click on rename. And then when you've clicked on rename, your name is going to pop up on the screen. And what I'm going to have you do is at the front of your name. So bring your cursor to the very front and add the number of years that you have been in your current responsibility, your current job, the number of years. That's all I need. All right. So if you would do that, that'd be great. And then what we'll see is we're going to have a quick glance of all the participants that are with us right now. And you're going to see how many have been in their role right at this moment. I see 4, I see 2, 10, 17, 20, 23. Wow, we have a winner. 8. All right. So we're just renaming ourselves 8+ years. Very good. All right. 17. All right. So there you go. Now that gives me a little idea of who's here. Now you could do the same thing in a presentation or a team meeting. We've done this with some meetings where we've just had people coming from all over the United States, actually from around the world, and we've asked them to add to their name what state they're in or what city they're in, and it was kind of a fun way to make some connections. And so that's just one little technique right off the bat that I wanted to demonstrate for you. Now, what I'm going to have us do is I'm going to have us get right into some of our content for today. And I'm going to talk to you about the 2-minute rule. If you'll take a look at that photo right there, you're going to see the 2 is prominent in the picture. And what we've been told in the past as presenters, if you remember college speech class or high school, we were always told you had 2 minutes to capture people's attention. If you didn't get their attention in that first 2 minutes, you were probably not going to have their attention at all. Well, I've got some bad news. Are you ready for this? We no longer have only 2 minutes. If you look at the second hand clock, It's right now about 6 to 7 seconds. It's approaching 8 seconds. And the reality is, according to the research in the last couple of years, we have only about 8 seconds when we do a presentation, particularly virtually, 8 seconds to get people's attention, to engage them in some way right up front. Now, I think the reason why that happens is because, well, we've all done this, haven't we? We picked up our phones and we've become accustomed, or we've been conditioned to scrolling. And we just scroll through until we see something that captures our attention. It might be a photo, a headline. We look at it, and if we're really interested, we'll click and go further, or we'll go on to the next thing. We are all now very much conditioned in a virtual digital way to quick little snippets. And so for you and I in a presentation or in a virtual interaction, we only have a short time to get people's attention. So I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can do that. The first thing is to ask people a question as you begin. Ask them something very specific that cannot be answered with a yes or no answer. You need to ask people questions that cause them to think and then respond in their own words about their thoughts regarding the subject, maybe their experiences of some form of related to your topic, whatever it may be. We need to ask. So I'm going to ask you right now in the chat. Yes, if you would, get ready to chat. Respond to this question. What is the one thing that frustrates you about virtual interactions? What's the one thing that frustrates you about virtual interactions? Now, you've had over a year of virtual interactions that was forced upon you, so I'm sure you've got something. So if you would, use the chat. There we go. I see talking to a wall. Yes. We just feel like we're talking to a brick wall. Okay, I'm seeing some more. Multitasking during the meetings. Thank you. People don't turn on their video. We're going to talk about that today. Typical office distractions that take away your attention. No interaction. That's a big one. That's why we're having this presentation today. Talking over each other. Yes. Late showing up and prone to distractions. Good. Very good. I'm scrolling. Thank you for your responses. Now, see what happened is right away, I've asked you a question that you get to respond to in a very personal way. So that's one thing that you and I can do right away. But here's another thing. You could do something social. Depending on the kind of meeting, instead of diving right into the agenda or into a presentation, you could engage people. Here's a reality. Everyone right now is hungry for interaction, for personal connection. In fact, what we're beginning to discover is that, yes, everybody wants good content, but community is the new content. People are wanting to have a chance to just really make a connection with other people. And so what you could do is facilitate some sort of social interaction, which I demonstrated for you just a moment ago when I asked you to put in how many years you've been in your current responsibility. It is a simple way of making some kind of connection. We could then have introduced people who have been 10 plus years, or we could have introduced the folks that just started in their role and asked them to tell us a little bit about their experience. So ask, do something social, or just kick things off. And I would suggest you kick things off with something that's unexpected, or a story, a short story, a story that you could probably tell in about 2 minutes. All right. Something that is not the usual, hello, thank you for coming. I'm so grateful to the committee. All of the biography, people aren't interested in all that. If you capture their attention right away, you're off to a great start. Now, there's something else I'd like you to keep in mind. Another tip to make your meetings a little bit better. Do your best to avoid using the chat as just another place for mindless chatter. How many times have you sat through a session where maybe the presenter said, type into the chat, yes, if you agree with me? It happens all the time. So frequently that we kind of disconnect from chat and we don't get involved. What I want to encourage you to do is to use chat for conversation, meaningful conversation. It's the one tool that's the easiest and people are now used to, that we can actually make some connections. And so when we have a discussion or we get a response, we can look at that chat and we can say, oh, okay, when people don't turn on their video. Thank you so much, Julie, for bringing that up. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And we can invite Julie to join the program, turn on her video, and give us a little more background. Using the chat for the beginning of conversation is very powerful. You could ask a very interesting question that might be controversial, and you could get involved in sharing their experience about that. You've got to make sure that what you are doing is you are moderating. You become not just a curator of content and virtual experience, but a moderator of the chat that's taking place as well. And it's hard to do. So sometimes you will have a moderator that helps you, a co-host in a sense, to just look at what's taking place, but make sure that when you do use chat and you ask the question, you pause and you take a little time to help people think. Now, about 18 months ago or more, when everything went into a virtual format, we started using Zoom predominantly, or Teams and other kinds of things. What I saw was a lot of presenters would ask the question, hoping for a quick response to chat, and seeing nothing in the chat, they'd move right on to the next piece of their presentation. But here's the thing we got to remember. Oftentimes when you ask the question, you've already been thinking about it. You've had time to process it. For most people, it's the first time they've heard the question and they're thinking about the response. Some people are trying to find their keyboard and other people are still navigating the chat. Give people time to think and don't be afraid of the pause. It's all right. Then when the responses come along, you're going to be in really good shape. Well, let's go back and let's look at some other features that maybe would be helpful to your experiences. And I like to call this the virtual screen choreography. Virtual screen choreography. Suddenly you become the choreographer, which simply means not assuming that everyone knows how to navigate. What we want to do is we want to make sure that, there we go, that you help people find their way through the application you're using. It could be WebEx, it might be Zoom, it might be Microsoft Teams. Don't assume that everyone's familiar with that particular tool. And so what you could do is take a few moments to just help people navigate. I already did this a little bit earlier. I asked you to take your cursor and go up to the view button in the upper right-hand corner. That was video choreography. Getting people to follow along, to click on speaker view so that you can see the speaker at all times, and whoever's talking, that's whose image is going to be there, helping people know how to do that. Maybe giving a little instruction on how to use the reactions. It's choreography, and we have to help people understand how to make that happen. I'm going to show you a couple other things that you can do as well, but here's what I'd like to consider. There's another choreography element that we should keep in mind, and that is when everyone's video is on and you see everybody in gallery mode, you could be a little more personal and say, oh, Sally, it's interesting. I just saw your cat. And there's a connection that we're making. Remember I said a moment ago, community is the new content. It's making those personal connections and noticing certain things. On occasion, we've done some virtual choreography by having a theme. And those that are participating in the program were encouraged to have something in their space that matched the specific theme. And they would have that available to them. And you can have a little choreography fun with that. Now, I'm going to guess that many of you joining us today are not necessarily presenters and doing lots of presenting through the virtual formats, but you are involved in virtual meetings. And you may be leading the meetings. It could be a team meeting, a board meeting, whatever it may be. You have a session where a group of people from 4 or 5 people, maybe up to 20, 25 people are involved in that meeting. And you're really wanting to make sure that those meetings are more productive. Well, I'm going to share with you 5 things that will help you have more effective and engaging meetings. Just 5. All right. Before I do, I'd like to find out. Here's your chance to respond to chat. What is the one tip that you would share to everyone that's joined us today to make your meetings more effective? What have you found to be the one thing that makes your meetings more effective? And here come the tips. These are going to be good. Yeah, providing opportunities for interaction. Have the agenda. Alyssa, I like that. Discussion pauses after the content. Oh, Tina's got a good one. Keep the energy up and don't linger on topics too long. And Becky, reaching out to people, going around the table for comments and thoughts. These are great. Will's got ask questions for group discussions. Good. Very good. All right. Well, here's what I'm going to do. Looking back at the screen, I'm going to share with you the top 5 tips that we have that we found to be the most effective. And somebody's already mentioned this one, the agenda. The agenda. Probably the most important thing that we can do is to make sure that we're sharing the agenda in advance. Not just having an agenda for your meeting, but making sure that everybody has the agenda before the meeting begins. And I would also add, send in advance any files, any reports, anything that they may need for that meeting. Too often we waste time in the meeting because we're just uploading a file to the chat, which is a wonderful feature to have, but people really need to have that stuff beforehand. There are a few of us who like to read through all of that before the meeting. And there are a couple of us who are reading it while the meeting's happening. It's the first time we've glanced at it. But make sure that that agenda is presented in advance to them. Here's number 4. Acknowledge. We want to acknowledge individuals. One of the tips that I saw here just a moment ago in the chat was going around the group and asking people to contribute, acknowledging different ideas. You can acknowledge in the chat certain people's comments and possibly involve them more, asking them for more detail in all of that process. Here's the next tip. We call this the about face tip. About face. Yes. Now, for those of us who have any military experience or background, you know that about face means you're turning around. But in this setting, what we're wanting to do is encourage everyone to have their videos on. If the videos are all off, the interaction is flat. But when the videos are on, we have a chance to truly connect and to make those conversations more meaningful. Now, this is just a personal thing, but if we were to have this team meeting in the office, you'd show up at the boardroom and you'd probably comb your hair and dress appropriately to be in that setting. And you would, in that boardroom or in that team room, have better eye contact and connection with people. The video on in a virtual meeting allows us to have the same level of professionalism as we would if we were in person. But you know this as well as I do. It takes more work to stay present and to focus and to be aware of what's taking place. We want to make sure that that happens. Video on is incredibly valuable to those team meetings. It also means that we have to be thoughtful about our interactions. And somebody had commented a moment ago that the distractions, the multitasking, guess what? In a team meeting, when you're focused on a certain agenda and the video's on, people tend to mind their manners a little bit better and stay a little bit more focused in that experience. Well, how about number 2? We call this the announce tip. And the announce tip is a very simple practice that oftentimes is missed. As the facilitator, the person leading the meeting, when you announce, you are pre-calling what you're expecting others to do during the meeting. For example, I announced a moment ago that I was going to ask you to respond to something in the chat. That gave you time to get ready. When the pandemic hit and everything shifted from in-person to virtual, I remember the first couple of programs I did for my clients, I would ask people a question and it was just like waiting forever for people to respond because they just hadn't gotten used to the chat. But when I started to say, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to use the chat, the responses came faster because they were ready. Here's another way you can use the announce tip. Ask people in the room, the virtual room, to respond to things. You might say, hey, Sally, I'm going to have you respond to this situation right here. And Joe, you're going to be up next. And now Joe's prepared. And it just helps to manage the flow of all the conversations that we have. One more thing, and it's the number one tip I want to share with you, and that is have action. Have action in your agenda and in that meeting. Action simply means you're going to focus in on the action items of your agenda, the decisions that you're needing to make as a team. They should be at the front end of your meeting. But have you sat in a meeting where the one thing we really needed to decide didn't ever really get any discussion? In fact, probably even got tabled because we got so distracted by other elements, other non-essentials. Things were on the agenda and sometimes the interruptions that pretty soon we've ran out of time and people had to go. Move the action items, the things that need your action, to the very front of that agenda and take care of those right away. Then save the back end for those conversations and planning things that you're needing to do. The other thing I'd recommend in regards to the action is to give some serious thought to the action on the screen. Yes, we can still have action. Remember choreography? It could be involving other people and asking them to turn their video on or to speak to a specific topic and you step aside. Having virtual visual interaction can be very helpful. You've already noticed that I'm using different settings. I'm using specific software to make that happen. Now you can do it in Zoom or Teams as well, but not probably like I'm doing, but I'm trying to provide a variety of virtual action so that the attention can be brought together. Now, are you ready for this? I am asked frequently, more frequently than I can recall, but I tell you what, it happens all the time. People are asking me, Stephen, to VB or not to VB. It's the virtual background question. Should I use a virtual background? And months and months ago, everybody was trying to figure that out. And we had some trouble with that. Sometimes the backgrounds were really not very appropriate, too busy, kind of scary. The people tried green screens and didn't quite figure out how to make that work. And they were wearing the wrong colors. And so all we saw was their head, or too much fuzz around, all those kinds of issues. And then some of us had a little fun and figured out that you could do some interesting things just to spice it up a little bit. Here are my favorite two backgrounds that popped up in 2020. All right. I'm going to ask you in the chat to put down which one of these you think is the funniest to you. Here they are. The first was a background of toilet paper. And the second one was somebody made their own mugshot background. It was so much fun and so out of the ordinary. So was it A, the toilet paper? Do you find that to be funny? Or was it B, the mugshot? What was that the funniest one? Let me see in the chat. I'm seeing mugshot, toilet paper, mugshot. What? There's a lot of folks who like toilet paper. And maybe you've done something that was a little fun with the background. We did a party once with a group of people, and the theme was Hawaii. And so I have a green screen, put that up behind, and I got a Hawaiian background sunset, and we all wore Hawaiian t-shirts for that event. You can change that background up, but the question still remains, to VB or not to VB? I would recommend that you not do virtual backgrounds if you don't have to. It's better if you curate, in a sense, something visual behind you, not something that's so distracting that they miss seeing you, but that you have that. Maybe it's a bookshelf with some books, a little pot of a flower, or it could be a nice little scene of something in your office space. Anything that you know that will just complement your presentation or your presence at that time. Suggestions: try not to have a window right behind you, because the light of that window will cause a dark shadow on your face, and it's hard for people to see. If you have a window behind you, find a way to close that. Use a curtain if possible. I'm asked frequently about my background. Yes, I have a virtual background, but this is actually a wall that has tiles on that. We also have different curtains. Of course, it's a part of the work that I'm doing, but I've found that people can find really nice ways of complementing what's behind them, and that's going to be better than the virtual background. If you do need to use a virtual background because you're currently doing most of your work from a little desk in your bedroom, and you don't want people to see everything behind you, then find a way to maybe do a little bit of a green screen. It could be a cloth, something. Guess what? Early on, I just went to Michael's and I got big squares of the poster boards that were green, and I taped them up on the wall behind me. It works just as good. Don't have to spend a lot of money on the professional green screens, but a green screen is going to help to help you deal with that. How do you deal with that? Well, let me just show you very quickly if you have not ever noticed this before. But when you are in Zoom and you want to do a virtual background, you will click on the little button next to your video. The menu is going to pop up where it says virtual backgrounds. Click on that, and this image is going to pop up on your screen. Now, it will be your face in that box, but you'll see that you have the opportunity to click on virtual backgrounds. Now, these right here are the defaults. Those are the defaults. But right here, you'll see a little plus sign where you can add your own photos. And that can be a fun little thing for you to do. But it's not all about backgrounds. It's about connections. As I've mentioned, people are longing for more interaction, more engagement. And if you remember when we were in the office, many times conversations took place in the hallway, around the water cooler. Well, guess what? You have the same opportunity in virtual presentations, virtual interactions, and it's called breakout rooms. The breakout rooms. If you're the host of the program, you will have the opportunity to set up a breakout opportunity. And I'm going to show with you what it looks like. Down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see breakout rooms. And when you hit breakout rooms, you will see this box pop up right there. And that right there gives you the option to choose how many breakout rooms you want, and you can assign automatically. So everybody that's in the group will be divided up as to how many rooms you have, or you can assign manually right there. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment, but I want to highlight this third one. Zoom now allows us to let participants choose a room. Yeah. Now, I'm going to just say really quickly that there is a little catch with choose a room. It's a fun feature. But if someone is participating in the Zoom program from their phone, or they're participating on their computer, but not in the Zoom application, they're participating through a web browser, those two people, phone or web browser, will not have the feature and ability to choose their own room, you'll end up having to find a way to get them into that room. So a little bit of a glitch right there. But I told you I was going to come back to the assign manually. The assign manually can be an excellent tool to engage people in very specific group discussions. Now, if there's a large group, it can be kind of challenging because when you hit create rooms, all the names are going to pop up and it gives you the choices, room 1, 2, 3, and then you can select who goes to those rooms. One thing I like to do is, well, I like to use that renaming technique, and I can ask people what departments they work in. And if they put the department before their name, when it comes time to assign them to a room, I can see very quickly everyone who's in shipping. Their shipping's right there, and I can assign all of them to one group session. Everybody who's in marketing, I can send them to a group session. And the breakout becomes a little bit more engaging because they're sharing some experience with people they already know or need to know. So there's a technique that I want you to consider as you think through how you function with all that's going on. Now, we're going to just keep moving because I want to make sure we cover all the things that are going to be most helpful to you. Polling has become a little bit of a pain in the neck for a lot of folks. When we pop up the poll, that little poll that the presenter gets to click on. When we pop up that poll, what's happening is that people are going, oh no, just one more poll I have to participate in. And I just don't want to do it. It's gotten a little old. I'm going to show you how to use it, but I'm also going to give you some techniques of how you can do polling a little bit more creatively, okay? First thing to consider, if you're going to have a poll, the person who sets up the team meeting is the one who has to create the poll. After you've set the meeting up and you have all the information on when that meeting is going to take place and all the different settings you have, at the bottom of the screen, it shows you polling, and you have to create the poll there if you want to have it ready in advance. Zoom has adapted and updated the program so that you can create a poll on the fly. But what happens is it takes you out of your Zoom to the browser, you create the poll there, and then it populates back to your program. So it's a little clunky. So I always advise people have your polls ready in the very beginning. Let me show you where you click on that. When you click on poll, this is the window that's going to show up for you. And that little box right there is not going to be visible to your audience, to you folks, until you hit launch the poll. When you hit launch poll, well, this is what's going to come up on everyone else's screen. As they are responding, this window is what you will see right here. This is the response window, and you'll begin to see live how people are responding to the poll at that time. And when you're done, you will close the poll. Whoops. I love it. You'll close the poll by hitting the stop sharing of your results, but that's when everybody gets a chance to see how the response has been given. All right. And even when the technology is working great, we get ahead of ourselves, don't we? So what other ways can we use polling? Well, you could use different programs. One's called Millimeter. Another one is called Poll Everywhere. Those are third-party polls where people can literally use their phones to respond, or in the web browser, they can do that as well. Or you can make it as simple as the finger poll. You could use a finger poll. It could look like this. I'd like everyone to give me a response to this question. And you state the question, and then you give them a response. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you respond to this situation? How does this apply to you? And they hold up their hands, and they use whichever finger applies to them. Instead of using the chat so that they're typing it in, why not just have everybody's camera on and they can give this? Or You could have people use the emojis for thumbs up or thumbs down, but why not just say thumbs up, thumbs down? There's all kinds of ways to do it. Or if you've had time to prepare in advance, give people different creative ways of responding. A red, a green, or a yellow card, and everybody has those. And when you're talking about a project that you're wanting to move forward, ask people, do you feel you're ready? And they can hold up whichever they feel they need to do. Another way of using the red card is to have people use the red card when they need to ask for clarification. Visually, they can hold that up and get the moderator's attention. There's all kinds of ways of using polling so that people are more engaged at any particular time. One more thing, here we go. And I'd like to make sure that everybody is aware of this. And that is sometimes we are needing to make sure that your particular video image is what everybody sees instead of all the gallery. You want to spotlight and make sure that one individual is in the feature of all times. And what you do is you go up to their video screen, their little box, you hit the three dots, the menu pops down, and you will see Spotlight Video. Now, you will only see that if you are the host or co-host, okay? I'm going to have you right now scroll over your video or your name. Remember the more. And I'm going to ask you to start video. I'd like everyone to start their videos right now. And we're going to get a chance to see everybody popping up. There we go. There we go. All right. And I'm going to remove the spotlight that's been on me. If you'll go up to View, hit Gallery, so everybody's in a gallery mode. Okay. Good. Very good. You all look beautiful. This is fantastic. There's real faces. You're doing the about faces. This is great. Now, what I'm going to do is, because I'm the host, I'm going to spotlight Lauren for everyone. And her image now should be what is present on the screen. But she's not the only one. I could also add Will. And now the two of them might be presenting together and sharing a little of their project that they're working on, or possibly we could get, I could add Julie and I could add Lisa. And now we have a panel discussion because I'm using the spotlight at those times. When I'm ready to remove each one, I just remove spotlight and we go back to gallery mode. Now it takes a little effort, but that's how we make it happen. Okay. And if you would now go back, here we go. I'm going to go back and I'm going to spotlight mine. Yeah. And I'm going to take a short break before we go into the very last part that I wanted to share with you. And that's some tips on how to present a little more engaging content when you know that the topic is a little tedious. Would that be helpful? I'll be right. We'll get right to that in just a moment. But before we go there, I'd like to let you know that we have an opportunity. Here we go. If this has been helpful, if you've noticed one tip that's made a difference for you and it's intrigued you, I'm really glad that that's happened. If you are thinking this next year is going to be interesting, we'll probably be in the office or we're probably still going to be virtual. You know what? The fact is virtual is not going to go away. We're going to be adapting it more and more in all kinds of situations, more hybrid kinds of experiences. And the importance of making sure that our virtual influence is at the very best level we can give, that's always going to be on our minds. I was telling Tina before we began, I spoke to a guy this week and I said, you know, this whole virtual experience and everything we're having to learn, it's like laying track in front of a moving train. Mhm. There's never going to be a destination when we've arrived. We're always going to have to find ways to keep learning to be relevant with the tools that are available to us. And if you would like to improve your virtual influence, I'd like to encourage you to consider some VIP training. Now, VIP stands for Virtually Interactive Presentations. The first thing I'd like you to know about is the VIP Exchange, Champions in the Chaos. I interview on a weekly basis through a Zoom show business leaders, athletes, Hall of Fame speakers, all kinds of folks, managers. We get to have a chance to visit for 20 to 30 minutes on what they're learning, their pain points and how they've overcome them, and what they're doing to be more effective in the virtual interactions and how they lead more in a virtual setting. That program is free. And all you have to do is register for it, and you'll get an update every week as to what the program is going to be and how you can participate. But if you'd like to take it up a notch, you want to really up-level your virtual coaching experience, I want to encourage you to consider the mentoring and what I'm coaching workshop that we have called the VIP Tour. It will help you really focus on communication and connection from the screen to screen. It includes 2 advanced sessions, a follow-up Q&A, some hot seats. Hot seats means you get to practice something that you're doing for the first time, and you get good feedback, positive reinforcement, a PDF workbook of all kinds of resources to help you make your virtual interactions better, and of course, recordings of every single one of those. And the best way for you to be a part of that is to simply go to virtuallyinteractivepresentations.com. virtuallyinteractivepresentations.com. And when you get there, go to the VIP options right at the top. I'm just going to highlight that right here. And when you click on that, it's going to take you to the opportunity to get more information and to register for that event. And we have one coming up. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that you know that as we're wrapping up the year, we've already arranged to have a really great discount on the training. But for you, for the next 7 days, through Wednesday, we are offering a special additional 10% discount just for you. And if you use the code IFMAKC21, you'll get that extra discount. All right. So with that said, I told you I promised to get to the tips for tedious topics. Yep. Tips for tedious topics. Not all of us have a presentation that's exciting. It's not necessarily entertaining. It's sometimes just a report that needs to be given, and it might involve lots of data. It could involve spreadsheets. It's not necessarily something that's really sexy, but we've got to give that presentation. And there's some ways that you can still make it as engaging and keep people's attention. And here's what I'm going to have you do. Consider these tips. Instead of using bullet points and your PowerPoint slides that's just packed with lots of information, use strong images. Find some images that for you help to convey the message that you're speaking about. Use free images. I would suggest that you can try going to websites like unsplash.com or pixabay.com, and you can find images that are royalty free that you can use in your presentations and not feel like you're violating some sort of copyrights or have some issues with that. Strong images are going to be more memorable for people than simple bullet points. The next thing is use story. Make sure that you use some form of story. If you have some data you're sharing, what does that data represent? Can you connect it to a vendor? Can you connect it to a customer that you've served? Is there some way that there's a personal connection to that information and you can briefly tell the impact of what that means to them? Simplify your slides. That's the next one I want you to consider. Instead of using that PowerPoint with all of those bullet points and everybody's read it before you even finish point number 2, use one image at a time or one point at a time and simplify them. Keep it as if you've noticed, I've tried to make sure that the font is very large. because some people, they're trying to view the program on a phone. And when it's really small font, they can't see it all. So be very, very conscious of simplifying your slides. If you're going to screen share, I want to encourage you to limit how much you share of your screen. Just share it for a few minutes and then come back to you and have the conversation, the dialogue that needs to happen, maybe the Q&A that needs to take place, and then share your screen again instead of the entire time. And then spotlight. The spotlight tip has to do with those spreadsheets where you've got so much, rows and columns and data, and you're talking about maybe column F, row 9, and it's right in the middle, and nobody can see it. So what I suggest is you take a screenshot of that and then blow it up and make that its own slide itself, and you spotlight that information. And you really focus in on it, and you can spotlight it by tying it back to the story. And the final tip that I'll share with you is this: stand. If you stand when you're making a presentation, you bring a different volume and tone, you bring a different energy. And if it's a tedious topic, if you're sitting in your desk and you're navigating with your mouse, pretty soon it gets a little weary on yourself. So you have the responsibility to bring the energy, and standing is what's going to take. If that means you prop it up, that camera, on the trash can, on a table, whatever you've got to do to get it up so that you can make that standing happen, that's going to be valuable to you. Now, we're going to shift to some Q&A, but before we do, if you have a desire for more information, you can go to my website, StephenIwersen.com. That'll give you more information about the training we do in regards to leadership development and the keynotes. Or if you're interested in the virtually interactive presentations information, you can go to that website as well. And with that, I'm going to just push pause in the presentation mode and open it up for you to ask the questions in the remainder of the time that we have. And to do that, I'd like to, instead of using chat, I'm going to ask you to just unmute, and I'm going to take myself off of that spotlight so that we can all be together in gallery mode. There we are. And let's see, what's on your mind? What would you like to know?
Stephen, one of the things someone asked on the chat was, what is the second site that you mentioned for photos to use?
It's called Pixabay, Pixabay, pixabay.com.
Thank you.
Yes. Someone else. How about I ask this? Oh, who's that?
This is Zach.
Hi, Zach.
Just a quick question. So you've given us a lot of good reminders for positive things to do in a presentation. Is there like a one-pager or something that just has, these kind of top 5 things in one place?
You know what? I don't have that, but I can provide that. I can get that to Tina and she can push that out to you. We'll just give you a quick summary synopsis of the tips that we gave today. Would that help?
That would be great, because in my context, I have volunteers that are leading presentations. It's not necessarily always me. And it'd be great to give them one thing that just has a bunch of tactics that they can use.
Very good. Okay. Yeah, we can do that. So let me ask you a question. What one tip today or one idea has been the most beneficial to you? Yes, Becky.
I like the pause after asking the question. I don't know that I've always done that. I lead not as many, but I usually lead a lot of meetings, and not so much right now, but I'm always asking questions, and sometimes it's a very active audience and sometimes it is not. So I like the idea of reminding myself to pause.
Okay. Someone else.
I thought that priming that you would be having coming up to use the chat box or something like that was a really good idea, because it is weird as a presenter to wait and you don't know how long or when people are going to start responding.
Right. Good. Yes, Lisa.
Mine's in a similar vein. I like the concept of just saying, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to chat.
Okay, very good. Becky, you were either voting for number 2 or you have another idea.
I like that you could just do fingers too.
Me too.
I do want to point out that I used to be a part of a group, and many of our members, some of our longer members might remember him, but I worked with John Roberts at Sprint and then at Bank of America, and he would always call your name first and say, Becky, you were working on this project, give us an update. And so it allowed you to kind of focus in if you weren't completely focused in, and get it together for a moment instead of going, well, we need to hear an update on that project, Becky. And then Becky is caught off guard and fumbled for a minute. So I like that you pulled that one out, because I appreciated when that individual would do that on his calls. These were mostly phone calls. It was 10 plus years ago, well before Zoom. And so he would do that, and people were all over the country at the time. So
good. Very good.
Thanks for reminding me about the PAL, Becky. I used to use it all the time. When we were at Sprint, when you're setting an agenda, you would use PAL, and it would be the purpose, the agenda, and logistics of a meeting. And it was actually one of my sticking points. If I didn't have a PAL before the meeting started, if I didn't want to, I didn't think it was important for me to attend. Because if it wasn't important enough for them to put together an agenda and to have a purpose for that meeting, then why should I waste my time? So it forces people to become more organized, and that's something I'm actually starting to get back into the habit of doing. I've gotten really, really lazy when it comes to putting together PALs, but I'm going to get much better. So look out, Will. You've got one coming your way for Friday.
That's awesome.
I've got a question, if this would be an appropriate time to ask. What do you do when you have somebody that wants to say too much?
Oh, okay. Time limits. If you know you have someone and you usually know who they are before the program or the meeting, start practicing time limits. And that simply means it's a rule that applies to everybody. During this response time or during our meeting, you will only have, and then you define the time, 2 minutes to ask the question, 2 minutes to respond to the question, whatever it is, because of the agenda that we have to go through. And when that individual takes more time, you just remind them that you only have so much time. And so you might even say, and I've done this frequently, we give people, one team that I work with, we give them up to 4 minutes. And I'll remind them when there's only 30 seconds left, I'll just pop in and say 30 seconds remains. And it's just a very quick audible call, and they realize that they have to police themselves. If you have somebody who violates that and they just keep talking all the time, that's an offline conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but it has to happen. And you need to just address them and talk to them about the reason why you need them to help you manage the conversation so that other people have equal opportunity for that dialogue, and ask them to become your champion of the time management. And it might actually begin to sway them a little bit more into that. So just a couple quick ideas.
Julie, we should use that rule for our upcoming strategic planning meeting.
Stephen, just a quick question about people turning their video on.
Yes.
And it seems like a lot of people just don't want to, whether, if they're working from home, as more people are, maybe they didn't get ready for the day, or it seems like people are offended if you ask them to turn their video on. So curious of any insight you have there.
Well, first thing is I will tell everybody in advance, it is the expectation we have as a group the expectation that we will be attending this meeting just as if we were in the room at work. Therefore, it's important that you have your video on. You wouldn't show up in the break room wearing a paper bag. But if you'd like to show up with your video on with a paper bag on your head, you're welcome to do that. Have some fun with it. So in advance, it's considered to be a part of the, we call them in our team, the rules of engagement. But I would also say that on occasion, you just have to understand that for some people, it's not a wise thing for them to have their video on. It could be they're driving. It could be that they are, like you said, they're working from their bathroom and they're sitting on the toilet with their laptop. And it's just not a good thing, or they've got kids running around. They're making a decision to not have their video on. And we have to have the courtesy to understand that, but to encourage it more and more, I think, is a good thing to do. And if you see somebody who's constantly not video on, you might, like we did with the person who takes way too much time to talk to them offline and convey to them how important it is, because we're trying to build that sense of connection and community, and we'd like to see your face.
Thank you.
Good question.
Could you make that fun? I just thought of this as you were explaining that, and do like a funny hat contest, one of those kickoff things, or, that's the only thing I could think of off the top of my head. But,
Yes.
We just went Halloween. What was your mask? Or,
Yes.
I work for the federal government. We have to wear the masks, not the Halloween mask, but the mask. Does anyone have a fun mask that they're going to wear with a fun slogan or something? I don't know. I'm just thinking through Lisa's comment.
I think having fun is good. Hey, Zach's got a hat.
There you go.
Yeah. Hat day, mask day, anything like that. I also know that there are some people who are in a situation where their access to the web, their broadband, it takes too much for them, and so they're encouraged not to. So what I would do is every once in a while during the meeting, ask people to turn their video on for just a few minutes while we talk about X, and then you can push pause, you can turn it off for the rest of the time. Just trying to find creative ways to keep them engaged will be helpful. Bring your pet to the meeting. Yeah, we have our production assistant at our house is a little Yorkie. She's about 5 pounds, and every once in a while she sneaks into the studio, and I just have to pick her up. And everybody loves it. All right. We're doing good.
We're starting to lose people, but we are 1 minute until 1. And so I really want to thank you, Stephen. This was excellent. I don't know if you've seen the notes, but Lisa just left and she said, thank you. It was very, very much. It was incredibly useful. And I hope that people have enjoyed it. Like I said, this is our first and will not be our last in our series of soft skills development. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to invest in yourself. And, that's what I think is my biggest message, especially right now, to all of my fellow IFMA members and friends and colleagues, is right now is the time to reinvest in yourself. And because some things are, like Stephen said, the tracks, trains going and the tracks being laid, and you can either be run over by the train or you can take a wonderful ride. And I suggest, join us and take a ride with us. And with that, Stephen, thank you so much. And everyone, be well.
Thank you, everyone. It was nice to meet you. Good luck to you.
Take care, all.